was fired by the pursuing IAF MiG-21, which slammed into his F-104. The Starfighter went down over Mirpurkaz along with its pilot. Changzi was posthumously awarded the Sittara-e-Jarat in honor of his wartime service. The IAF also claims 2 additional PAF Starfighter kills that same day, including squadron leader Rashid Bhatti's Starfighter. However, the PAF said he returned without damage to Masra or AFB. 1967 Taiwan Strait Conflict, edit. Republic of China, Taiwan, Air Force F-104J. On the 13th of January, 1967, 4 RACAF F-104G aircraft engaged a formation of J-6 forward/MiG-19s of the People's Liberation Army Air Force over the disputed island of Kinmen, Quemoy. Major Hu Shilin and Captain Shi Bi Puo each shot down 1 MiG-19. 1 F-104 did not return to base and its pilot was listed as missing in action. F-104 designer Kelly Johnson stated that this particular battle illustrated the relative strengths and weaknesses of the Starfighter in aerial combat. We had them on acceleration and we had them on steady-state altitude, but we could not turn with them, said Johnson, who at the time was working on the larger winged, more maneuverable CL-1200 Lancer derivative of the F-104. Other international service, edit. Main article, Lockheed bribery scandals. At the same time that the F-104 was falling out of U.S. favor, the West German Air Force was looking for a multi-role combat aircraft to operate in support of a missile defense system. In response, Lockheed reworked the Starfighter from a fair-weather fighter into an all-weather ground attack, reconnaissance, and interceptor aircraft, and presented it as the F-104G. The redesigned aircraft was chosen over the English Electric 1P, later the Lightning, Grumman F-11 F-1F Super Tiger, Bout F-8 Crusader and Republic F-105 Thunderchief. 10 other aircraft types, including the F-102, F-106, Saunders Row SR.177, and the Saab 35 Draken, were also considered but discarded earlier in the process. The F-104G was ultimately chosen because the other 2 finalists were still in the development phase while the F-104 was about to be introduced into USAF service. Although the American version lacked all-weather capability, Lockheed promised they could deliver this, and favorable reports by the German Ministry of Defense delegation sent in December 1957 to flight test the F-104 tipped the scales in the Starfighter's favor. The Starfighter found a new market with other NATO countries as well, and eventually more than 2,000 of all variants of the F-104 were built for international air forces. Several countries received their aircraft under the U.S. government-funded Military Aid Program, MAP. The American engine was retained but built under license in Europe, Canada, and Japan. The Lockheed ejector seats were retained initially but were replaced in some countries by the safer Martin Baker seat. The so-called deal of the century produced substantial income for Lockheed, but the resulting bribery scandals caused considerable political controversy in Europe and Japan. In 1976, a United States Senate investigating committee led by Senator Frank Church determined that Lockheed had paid $22 million in bribes to foreign officials during the negotiation processes for the sale of its aircraft, including the F-104 Starfighter. In Germany, Minister of Defense Franz Joseph Strauss was accused of having received at least $10 million for West Germany's purchase of the F-104 in 1961. On the 26th of August, 1976, Prince Consort Bernhard of the Netherlands was forced to resign as Inspector General of the Dutch Armed Forces after being accused of accepting approximately $1.1 million in bribes. In the Netherlands, the F-104 was used to aid in the ending of the 1977 Dutch train hijacking. On the 11th of June, 1977, almost 3 weeks after the start of a hijacking of a train by Moluccan separatists, 6 F-104 jet fighters of the Royal Netherlands Air Force overflew the train 3 times at low altitude, using their afterburners to disorient the hijackers as a precursor to an armed attack by Dutch Marines. None of the Starfighters used its weapons. The international service of the F-104 began to wind down in the late 1970s, being replaced in many cases by the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon, but it remained in service with some air forces for another 2 decades. The last operational Starfighters served with the Italian Air Force, which retired them on the 31st of October, 2004. NASA, edit. The Starfighter served with NASA from 1956 until 1994. A total of 12 F-104, F-104B, F-104N, and F-104G aircraft performed high-speed and altitude flight research at Dredon Flight Research Center. The F-104 also performed many safety chase missions in support of advanced research aircraft and provided a launch platform for sounding rockets. In August 1956, the USAF transferred YF-104 serial number 55-2961 to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, the predecessor of NASA, designating it NF-104. In preparation for the X-15 test program of the late 1950s, it was fitted with the Reaction Control System, RCS, consisting of hydrogen peroxide-powered thrusters mounted in the aircraft's nose and wingtips. This system provided valuable experience for future X-15 pilots and astronauts in spacecraft control and maneuverability. The trials began in 1959 and concluded in 1961, after which the aircraft was used for other NASA purposes until it was retired in November 1975. An F-104B, originally USAF 57-1303, later received civil registry as N819NA, NASA 819. It became the longest-serving NASA F-104 in both calendar time, 1958-1978, and flight hours. Its credits include being the first aircraft in history to perform manned testing of a bout at supersonic speed. It was also the first to test piloted landings of vehicles such as the X-15 and lifting bodies with the pilot using only stereo periscopic vision. It was used extensively for biomedical research, evaluation of new full-pressure suits, and general utility duties for NASA research. One notable case was its service as the final chase plane for the official FAI World Altitude Record flight of the H-3 X-15. Between August and October 1963, Lockheed delivered 3 single-seat F-104G Starfighters to NASA, designated F-104N, for use as high-speed chase aircraft. These were the only Starfighters built by Lockheed specifically for NASA. All other NASA aircraft were transferred from the USAF. The third of these F-104Ns, number 013, was destroyed on the 8th of June, 1966 in a mid-air collision with a North American XB-70 during a publicity photo flight for General Electric. One NASA F-104G, registration N826NA, was equipped with a flight test fixture, FTF, consisting of a pylon mounted on the fuselage centerline. The FTF contained instruments to record and transmit research data in real time to engineers in mission control at Dredon. One application of the FTF was testing heat-resistant tiles for use on the Space Shuttle, ensuring their bonding was sufficient at high speeds and evaluating their performance when exposed to moisture. The last of these missions flew on the 31st of January, 1994, bringing the F-104's service with NASA to a close after more than 18,000 flights. Use as Space Launch Platform, edit. In 2011, 4 Frontiers Corporation and Starfighters Inc., a private F-104 operator, began working together on a project to launch suborbital sounding rockets from F-104s flying out of Kennedy Space Center. First launches were expected to occur in 2012. In early 2016, another venture, CubeCab, was working on a rocket system that would launch CubeSats from F-104s. The company said it planned to begin providing launch services in early 2020. World Records, edit. The F-104 was the first aircraft to simultaneously hold the world speed and altitude records. On the 7th of May, 1958, USAF Major Howard C. Johnson, flying YF-104 of 55,957, broke the world flight altitude record for jet aircraft by flying to 91,243 feet, 27,811 m, over Edwards AFB. On the 16th of May, 1958, USAF Captain Walter W. Irwin, flying YF-104 of 55,969, set a world flight airspeed record of 1,404.012 miles per hour, 2,259.538 kilometers per hour, over a course 15 miles, 24 kilometers, long at Edwards AFB. Flying F-104 of 560762 over Nars Point, Mugu, California, USAF Lieutenants William T. Smith and Einar N. Evoldsen set several time-to-climb records on the 13th and the 14th of December 1958. On the 14th of December 1959, USAF Captain Joe B. Jordan, flying F-104C 560885 at Edwards AFB, set a new world altitude record of 103,389 feet, 31,513 m, in the process becoming the first aircraft to take off under its own power and cross both the 30,000 meter and 100,000 foot thresholds. He also set a 30,000 meter, 98,400 feet, time to climb record of 904.92 seconds. USAF Major Robert W. Smith, flying NF-104 of 560756, set an unofficial world altitude record of 118,860 feet, 36,230 m, on the 15th of November, 1963, and on the 6th of December, 1963 he flew the same aircraft to another unofficial altitude record of 120,800 feet, 36,800 m. Jacqueline Cochran, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve, flew TF-104GN-104L to set 3 women's world speed records. On the 11th of May, 1964, she averaged 1,429.3 miles per hour, 2,300.2 kilometers per hour, over a 1525 kilometer, 9.315.5 mi, course. On the 1st of June she flew at an average speed of 1,303.18 miles per hour, 2,097.26 kilometers per hour, over 100 kilometers, 62 mi, closed circuit course, and on the 3rd of June she recorded an average speed of 1,127.4 miles per hour, 1,814.4 km per hour, over a 500 km, 310 mi, closed circuit course. Lockheed test pilot Daryl Greenamier built an F-104 out of parts he had collected. The aircraft, N-104RB, first flew in 1976. On the 2nd of October of that year, trying to set a new low-altitude 3 km, 1.9 mi, speed record, Greenamier averaged 1,010 miles per hour, 1,630 km per hour, at Mud Lake near Tonopah, Nevada. A tracking camera malfunction eliminated the necessary proof for the official record. On the 24th of October, 1977, Greenamier flew a 3 km, 1.9 mi, official FAI record flight of 1,590.45 km per hour, 988.26 miles per hour. On the 26th of February, 1978, Greenamier made a practice run for a world altitude record attempt. At the conclusion of the practice run, he was unable to get an indication that the right landing gear was down and locked even after a number of attempts to cycle the gear. Low on fuel and faced with a landing situation that was not considered survivable, Greenamier successfully ejected, and the N-104RB crashed in the desert. Nicknames, edit. The Starfighter was marketed by Lockheed as the missile with a man in it, and the press dubbed the F-104 the Widowmaker due to its high accident rate, but neither were used in service. The term Super Starfighter was used by Lockheed to describe the F-104G in its marketing campaigns, but quickly fell into disuse. In service, it earned a number of nicknames among its users. One American pilots initially called it the 04, but when the F-100 Super Sabre began to be referred to as the Zip Zilch 400, the Starfighter acquired the similar nickname Zip 4. This was eventually shortened to Zipper or Zip. Over time this nickname came to be associated with the aircraft's impressive speed and acceleration. 2. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force called it Eiko, Kanji, Glory. 3. Although German pilots often referred to the F-104 as the Zipper or, specifically the G models, Gustav, it earned several less charitable names from the German public due to its high accident rate, common ones being Witwenmacher, Widowmaker, or Fliegende Sarg, flying coffin. It was also called Erdnagel, ground nail, the official military term for a tent peg. 4. Prior to the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965, the reputation of the Pakistani F-104 was such that the Indian Air Force referred to it as Badmash, hooligan, scoundrel, and wicked one. 5. Among Italian pilots its spiky design earned it the nickname Spiln, Happin. 6. Among the Norwegian public and Royal Norwegian Air Force it was affectionately known as Vestfjordoxen, the Vestfjord Bull, due to the immense roar of the aircraft based in Bod, at the southern end of Vestfjorden. 7. In the Canadian Forces, the aircraft was sometimes referred to as the Lawn Dart and the Aluminium Death Tube due to its high operational losses, and Flying Phallus due to its shape. It was affectionately called the Silver Sliver, Zipper, or Zip, but most often the Starfighter or simply the 104. 8. NASA's F-104B Starfighter N819 now acquired the nickname Howling Howland due to the unique howling sound of its engine at certain throttle settings. Flying characteristics, edit. The Starfighter was the first combat aircraft capable of sustained Mach 2 flight, and its speed and climb performance remained impressive more than 30 years after its first flight. Equipped with razor-edge thin-blade supersonic wings, visible from the cockpit only in the mirrors, it was designed for optimum performance above Mach 1.2. If used appropriately, with high-speed surprise attacks and good use of its exceptional thrust-to-weight ratio, it could be a formidable opponent. It was exceptionally stable at high speed, i.e., over 600 knots, 1,100 kilometers per hour, 690 miles per hour, at very low level, making it a potent tactical nuclear strike fighter. However, in a low-speed turning contest with conventional subsonic opponents, as Pakistani pilots were with Indian mists in 1965, the fighter was vulnerable. The F-104's large turn radius was due to the high speeds required for maneuvering, and its high alpha stalling and pitch-up behavior required attentiveness from its pilot. In reference to the F-104's low-speed turn performance, a humorous colloquialism was coined by a pilot in the skies over Edwards Air Force Base, banking with intent to turn. Takeoff speeds were between 180 and 200 knots, 330 and 370 kilometers per hour, 210 and 230 miles per hour, with the pilot needing to swiftly raise the landing gear to avoid exceeding the maximum landing gear operating speed of 260 knots, 480 kilometers per hour, 300 miles per hour. Climb and cruise performance were outstanding. Occasionally a slow light would illuminate on the instrument panel at around Mach 2 to indicate that the engine compressor was nearing its limiting temperature and the pilot needed to throttle back. Landings were also performed at high speed. The downwind leg of the circuit was typically flown at approximately 210 knots, 390 kilometers per hour, 240 miles per hour, with flaps in landing configuration, with the long, flat final approach flown at around 175 knots, 324 kilometers per hour, 201 miles per hour, and touchdown at 155 to 160 knots, 287 to 296 kilometers per hour, 178 to 184 miles per hour. Extra fuel, crosswinds or gusts, external stores, and other considerations could add up to 20 knots, 37 kilometers per hour, 23 miles per hour, to these speeds. Unlike most aircraft, the F-104 was landed with the engine at high power, as the boundary layer control system lost effectiveness below approximately 82% engine speed. Pilots were instructed not to cut the throttle while the plane was still airborne, as doing so would cause an abrupt, and generally uneven, loss of lift. To limit the Starfighter's landing roll, or distance traveled while decelerating from touchdown to taxi speed, powerful brakes were combined with a 16-foot, 4.9 m, drag chute. Early problems, edit.
Good. The camcorder is out of power. So that's a long reading. It's 11:30. I will take a break and charge my camcorder. So I cannot do, I will upload this. I need to relax like 40 minutes